Hey, it's Jared with Gear and Light, and I've got some beginner tips for those of you that want to shoot better quality video with your GoPros. There's some different videos that I've put out on the topic of GoPros, camera settings and stuff like that, some accessories. GoPros are a beast of their own. They're fantastic little cameras that can accomplish a lot, but you really need to understand a bit more than just how to hit record to get good quality video out of a GoPro. Now, with a GoPro Hero 10, each version of the GoPro, it's getting better, stabilization, image quality, all of that stuff is improving, but still understanding a camera and understanding how to get dynamic shots is important. So we're going to go through a few tips in this video, but I encourage you to take a look at my GoPro Getting Started course that's going to walk you through a lot more in-depth into some of these things that we talk about in this video, including some real-life examples, so that you can go out and better shoot great quality footage of whatever's going on in your life that you bought a GoPro to capture. So the first thing is camera settings, and I have a video specific to camera settings, so we're not going to talk about camera settings specifically in this video. You can click on the link in the description below to go to that video next, but camera settings are hugely important. A GoPro is configured to get the best that it can get based on what it can see, and in that automatic mode, it is trying to do a lot to capture and just get a decent image. But if you're trying to really make it do something, it's hard for the camera to do that while trying to do everything. So taking control over some of the camera settings and telling the camera what you expect out of it so that you can get the exposed shot that you're looking for with the vibrant colors and all of that stuff, it takes using some of the camera settings and telling the camera what to do. And so understanding camera settings is paramount to getting good quality GoPro footage, because pointing and shooting will maybe get you there if you're lucky, but if you get into a challenging situation with lighting, or the camera really has to do some thinking, it doesn't know exactly what it's supposed to be doing because it hasn't been told, and so it's just guessing. And so when we set our camera settings specific to achieve what we're trying to achieve, then we can get the results that we're wanting to get. Number two is to understand lighting. Lighting is everything in photography and video, and if lighting isn't good, you're not going to get a good quality image out of your GoPro. If you point your camera directly into the sun, you're not going to get the best image because it's trying to expose for that extremely bright glob out there, and so it's going to underexpose everything else that's going on around it, especially if you're not controlling your camera settings like I talked about earlier in the video. So pointing the camera directly into sunlight, which can be challenging because with such a wide angle lens it's capturing so much, but if you could think about the angle of your light and the way that the camera is basically what the camera is seeing, then you can control the environment better and give the camera the best opportunity to capture a great image. Now this also comes into effect when you're positioning your subject. If you're using the camera to capture you first person, or capture you in more of like a selfie angle or something like that, how is light hitting you? If you're pointing the camera at yourself but the light is coming from behind you, the camera is going to see all of that light and it's going to expose for that light, and you, because the front of your face is in the shadows, is going to be dark, and you're not going to be as exposed as the background, so you're not going to have a very dynamic looking shot. If you're pointing the camera out towards things and there's some really bright areas and some really dark areas, it's going to be challenging for the camera there as well, because it's going to have to try and expose for the bright areas and also try and expose for the dark areas. You can mitigate that by controlling the camera settings, but even the camera settings can only take you so far. You can't choose to expose both perfectly. Bright areas and dark areas are often uncontrollable, especially in environments that you're using a type of camera like a GoPro, and so you have to expose for the best possible scenario, and that's where controlling camera settings and also just being mindful of the light that is all around you that you're going to be capturing is going to help you just so much when it comes to figuring out what your shot is going to have in it. Because if you you've got direct sunlight and you've got shadow areas, it's going to be really hard for the camera. So if you can position your camera and direct your camera in a way where that is minimized, those big contrast jumps from bright to dark are minimized, it's going to help the camera out so much. Another area that is challenging for GoPros is lower light situations. Filming with a GoPro indoors or in darker situations is very hard on a GoPro. By default, the GoPro is going to increase the sensitivity of the sensor, which is going to also decrease the quality of the image. And so in my camera settings video, I talk about setting a ceiling to that so that it can only go so high, because I would rather an image be a little bit underexposed than be exposed but also be super grainy, because the sensitivity was boosted so high on the camera that it went beyond its ability to capture a clean shot. So also consider in lower light situations that you may need to add external lighting, open up a window, turn on some lights, or even get some external lights to point in the general direction of your subject so that you can get better lighting and you don't have to make the camera work so hard. Now, the third thing is just utilizing something to manage that light. And so I have ND filters on my cameras because when I'm outdoors shooting in brighter environments, the background lighting is really hard to control. The bright sky can be overpowering for the subjects. When there is such a big difference between the lighting in the sky, how bright the sky is, and your subject, it becomes challenging to expose your subject properly. So if you could bring down the amount of lighting and expose for your subject, then your background is not going to be as blown out or as bright as it would have been otherwise. So for example, when I'm using a GoPro in something like an airplane, a small airplane, and I've got it pointing at me, I want to be exposed properly, of course. But if I'm exposing myself properly inside of an airplane where the lighting is darker than outside the windows, of course there's window light coming in and all of that stuff, making it bright inside the airplane, but it's definitely brighter outside of the airplane. If I don't control anything and I expose myself properly, everything outside, all the detail outside of the windows is going to be lost. It's going to be overexposed. And so I'm not going to see the beautiful blue sky. It's going to look more white to me. And if there's mountains or anything else in the background, those aren't going to look too great either. But if I put an ND filter on the camera and limit the amount of light so that I can expose myself properly, I have more control over the lighting outside as well, because it's not going to be as bright either. And so even though this is changing the exposure across the board, it's going to decrease the exposure of the outside light and the light inside, which would be the light that exposed me. It still gives me more camera control for a better overall looking image, limiting that light and not making it so harsh, because the camera settings are going to have to be really boosted as well when not using an ND filter. And so your image is going to look overly sharp, and it's just not going to feel very cinematic if you're not using something like an ND filter. Now, in an indoor environment like I'm in right now, an ND filter is just going to cut out too much light. I cannot use an ND filter in lower light situations. I will need to take this off and use the standard filter cover that just comes on the GoPro. But an ND filter set is going to help you get much more dynamic shots outdoors, because it's going to limit the amount of bright light, and it's not going to make the sensor fight so hard to expose for that, especially if there are other subjects in your scene. So an ND filter is a great accessory. I talk about it in my accessories video. I think I even talked about it in my camera settings video. But an ND filter is almost a non-negotiable when it comes to using GoPros. It's going to help you get better looking footage across the board. The fourth tip I have for you is mounting your GoPro in a stable way. Nothing is more annoying than GoPro footage that is shaky. And GoPro has really improved their stabilization in the camera, so you get nice smooth footage, but you can overwork it by having a poor mounting solution for your GoPro. And there's things that it just can't recover from. So what happens with this wide angle lens is that there are things, even if you do have shaky footage, things towards the center aren't going to be shaking as much, because that's the center of the scene. As you get further to the outer edges of the scene, the shakes are emphasized and everything is bigger. And because there's a natural bit of warping to the GoPro lens, it's just going to feel weird, and it's not going to be it's going to take a person out of the moment of watching that footage. And so stable mounting solutions are hugely important. And later on in the video, we're going to talk about composition, and sometimes mounting a GoPro in a stable way is going to affect your ability to get the perfect angle. So you have to find a happy medium there, or a good balance of being able to mount a GoPro stable and also getting the shot that you want to get. But I would say that a stable mounting solution is better than having the perfect lined up composed shot, because shaky footage that is all over the place is almost unbearable to watch, and it takes a person out of the moment, where I would rather be in the moment and watching than just being kind of taken out of it because there's too much shake and stuff happening in the footage. And so stable mounting solutions are hugely important, whether you use clamps or suction cup mounts or whatever you use. Minimize the distance between the camera and the mounting point, because the more distance that you have, the more opportunity this basically paperweight has to move around and shake around and create its own vibration. So the smaller amount of distance you can have between the GoPro and the mounting point, the better. It's going to minimize the amount of vibration and shake that you're going to have, and that the internal stabilization is going to have to overcome. So the next thing is audio quality. Audio quality is another huge one, because poor audio quality can make something not necessarily unbearable to watch, but it takes you out of the experience. I would rather have really good audio and okay video quality than have poor audio quality and good quality video. I hope that all made sense. So in considering how to capture audio on a GoPro, there are some tips that I have for you. The main microphone on the camera is this front microphone, and usually it's pointing forwards towards the wind, and as it's moving through the wind, you're getting a lot of wind pickup through the microphone. So utilizing something like the Media Mod, which at least has a slightly better microphone but has a windscreen that goes over it, is a huge improvement. Another thing that I've seen people do is get a piece of cotton and put it over the microphone, but you have to be careful that whatever like glue or stickum that you're using to stick it to the GoPro doesn't cover up the microphone holes. So at least some of that will block it. I've even seen a few products on Amazon that are like kind of like clip-on things that kind of help, but they're really not going to help enough, whereas the Media Mod is going to help dramatically in cutting down that noise. And it being a stable solution to mounting on the GoPro, it's probably one of the only ones that is there. Of course, I can mount external microphones and capture audio in another way. That's another option. I've seen some guys that do, like they ride dirt bikes, or they go on rides on the street on their motorcycles, and so they have a microphone coming out of the camera that actually mounts up into their helmet, and so they're getting much better audio quality because they're minimizing that altogether, that wind noise altogether, and mounting their mic somewhere where there isn't wind happening, which is up inside of their helmet. So you could even consider using an external microphone and mounting that in a way where it's not going to have as much access to direct wind, which is going to degrade audio quality if there's too much wind. In an airplane, because they're smaller airplanes and they're really noisy, we're just piping audio straight in from the headsets, and so you're only hearing audio really when we're talking. And so that's another option. If you are in some sort of a vehicle or an environment where you can get audio, you could just plug it in directly. If you're mounting a GoPro in a way where it's not so susceptible to getting hit, you can use external microphones. Rode makes a microphone that you can mount on here, utilizing, if it's the Media Mod here with the cold shoe mounts, you can slide it right in, or you can get some sort of a little adapter that allows you to mount the microphone next to it, and you could plug in the microphone using, if you're with the Media Mod, you have a 3.5 millimeter jack right on the bottom. If you don't have that, GoPro makes a USB-C to 3.5 millimeter adapter that you could plug in audio and bring audio in from an external microphone that's going to provide a better overall audio experience than the default microphone that the camera has. But you can also minimize that by making sure that there's just no direct wind going right into the microphone. Now, if you're filming like yourself and you're moving forward, of course the wind is going to be hitting the back of the GoPro, and so that's going to minimize things too by the fact that the microphone is not pointing into the wind and capturing wind. The back of the camera is what's hitting the wind, and so that's going to minimize things. The GoPro microphone still is not that great. It's not going to capture the best quality audio, but what we're doing is we're minimizing the opportunity for wind to hit the microphone, thus producing better audio quality. So just think about what the microphone is going to have to come in contact with as it's filming whatever it is that you're trying to film, and minimize that. Another alternative would be if you've got to put one into the wind and there's no way to get good audio out of it, find a different way to capture audio. If you don't want to run a cord out of your camera into some other sort of microphone, get a little microphone and recording device that you could plug in and just keep and use that as external audio and capture your audio separate from the GoPro. And then of course you'd have to edit those two things together, but that's another consideration there as well. Now the last tip I have for you really is about composition and stabilization. I mentioned it a little bit earlier when we talked about securely mounting your GoPro to avoid shake, but composition is important, and a lot of times people just mount a GoPro and point it in the general direction of what's going on, and that doesn't make for very interesting to watch footage. If you're going for like a POV, like a point of view, then what you really need to do is mimic the actual point of view that a person sees. I see a lot of people mount GoPros on top of their helmets like a spinny propeller hat, and that just doesn't provide what a person is experiencing on that dirt bike or that bicycle or whatever it is when it's mounted on top of the helmet. It just looks weird. When I spin my head around, it's spinning on a pivot because it's directly top center on the top of my head. That's not how our eyes work. Our eyes are forward. When I turn my neck, I'm getting a different view than if my eyes were mounted at the center point of my spine, right in the center of my neck. And so when we mount a GoPro, don't mount it on top of your helmet. Get a mount and mount it right in front of your mouth. Mount it to the helmet to where you're getting the most point of view perspective that you see that you can provide to the camera without affecting. Obviously, you can't put it in front of your eyes and hope to see around the camera. That's a distraction, and that's going to cause you to get yourself hurt. But if you can mount it right in front of the chin or something like that, or just right, upside down and right above your eyebrow line, depending on what it is that you're wearing, the type of helmet that you're wearing, if that's even possible, you're giving a much better perspective because your composition is more in line with what the person is expecting to see. And if you are on like a dirt bike or a bicycle or a mountain bike or anything like that, you could, of course, mount it directly to your bike, but that's not giving the person the same perspective either. They're, in watching the video, they're feeling and experiencing what the bike or the dirt bike or the car or whatever it is experiencing, and that view might be fine, but that being the only view is not as immersive as a point of view, a POV view, and so consider what it is that you're capturing. If you're, mounting this to something like a surfboard or something like that, it might be a little harder to mount it to yourself, and really you're wanting to see yourself, then consider the best view that you can provide for the viewer. If we're not trying to go for a POV, but we're trying to go for showing the action or whatever is happening, make sure you're giving the best view from the best angle. Mounting, if you are mounting to handlebars, mounting out towards the edge of the handlebars means that there's going to be a lot more movement to the camera than if you center mounted where the camera is not moving nearly as much as the big movements that happen on the outside. So just consider placement of the camera and overall composition. That also means where is the subject positioned in your shot as well. Those are all things to consider and think about when composing your shot. So I hope that those tips really helped. There's a lot to consider when it comes to photo and video and getting just great shots, but really practice makes perfect. So get out there, mount your GoPro, move it around, try some different things, and figure out what looks best for you. If you want more, you can of course check out my course that's linked below. That's going to walk you through a lot more, including how I would set up and configure things in different shots so that you can get some ideas. I like more of a structured framework for learning, and so the course is available. If that's something that interests you, you can sign up for it down using the link below. But that's going to do it for this video. If you found this useful, give it a thumbs up so that I know that, and make sure to subscribe to the channel so you can be notified when I put out new content on this channel. But that's going to do it for today. Thanks so much, and I hope to see you back in another one soon. Take care.